Hello, everyone. Welcome to our second webinar of the Empowering Women in Entrepreneurship series. So glad you could be here. We've still got some folks floating in, which is great. But just to honor your time, I'll go ahead and get us started. So Jenny, who's helping me out with some of our Zoom tech today, if you can go to the next slide, please. Great. So my name is Lynn O'Brien, and I'm our Women's Empowerment Coordinator this summer with the City of Webster Groves. Thanks to a grant that we have, we are lucky to have this position as well as funding for our microgrants and the ability to work with these three speakers to make this webinar possible. So your mic and camera are off, and you're welcome to engage with us throughout the chat for this hour. Our team will be here to make sure that everything's going smoothly. And then we'll hear from Gabriela. And then at the end, we'll ask you to fill out a 5-minute survey that for us is really a good way to understand how this series is being received and how we can make it more accessible in the future should we secure more grant funding. So please do take a moment to fill that out and let us know about your experience. I'll also share about a $1,500 micro grant opportunity for folks who identify as women who live in Webster Groves and who attend all 3 webinars in this series. And then afterwards, this is being recorded, and I'll send you a link at that same email where you got your registration and Zoom link. I'll follow up with a recording link, the survey link, and ultimately share some resources that are going to be collected from our speakers and community about how to empower your next steps as an entrepreneur. All right, we'll take a look at the next slide there, Jenny. So just to orient you, many of you came to our first webinar with Christy Jackson. That was on Friday, and it was just fabulous and such a strong start to our series here. Today, we will have Gabriela Ramírez-Arellano sharing on Unleash Your Potential, Claiming Your Power and Influence. And then on Tuesday, the last webinar in our series will be with Precious Simone, who's a 2-time best-selling author and inspirational speaker, sharing about leveraging your network, build meaningful connections, and unlock opportunities. All right. So I think, Jenny, if that's the end of the slides, we can just pause screen sharing and I will introduce our speaker. All right. You're welcome to comment throughout the chat here. If you have any questions, hi, Kim. Happy Thursday to you as well. All right. So it's my pleasure to also share that this webinar series is made possible from a grant from the National League of Cities, as well as the City Inclusive Entrepreneurship Program. Dr. Peoples, our city manager, has been working closely with me and our team to really help bring this to life. So we just want to give a shout out to them for making this possible. All right, and now to introduce our speaker. As you may have seen in the email that I sent out with the Zoom link, Gabriela Ramírez-Arellano, who is our featured speaker today, is actually receiving an award right now in St. Louis. The St. Louis Business Journal is recognizing her as one of their most influential businesswomen. So we're very excited for her. And while it means she can't attend live, we did meet early and pre-record her content. And so this will be my second time watching, and I can't wait. It is such fabulous, relatable, and really inspiring information. So I hope you enjoy. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce a little bit about Gabriela. Originally from Mexico and inspired by her experience growing up in the US, Gabriela is committed to helping others. Since returning to St. Louis in 2016, she has centered her volunteering efforts around small business support, economic development, and language access. Gabriela helps small business owners achieve their dreams through her work at CORTEX and with her podcast, Auténtico. Through her work at the BALSA Foundation, she promotes social equity and prosperity. An author and marathon runner, Gabriela is a MIZZOU and Lindenwood grad and most proud of raising amazing children who inspire her to help make the world a better place. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and share our screen. If you can let me know in the chat, just to quickly confirm that you're able to hear this video. Oh.
Hello, and thank you, Lynn. Hello, everyone. Buenas
I'm just going to pause there to make sure. Are you able to hear this? Okay, great. Thank you, Kim. All right, so how it's going to work, I'm going to play her presentation for you, but I'll still be available here in the chat. Gabriela is going to be reading the chat after the fact, and she's also asked that we share her email address. And any of you, if you have questions, if there's ways that she can support you, she would love to hear from you after this webinar. So in lieu of her being able to interact live, we're going to get a little creative. So I'll certainly answer any questions I can. She'll ask questions at times, so please do share freely in the chat, knowing that she will engage with this after the fact. All right, we'll get started with Gabriela. Here we go.
Tardes. I am so excited about our time together, and I want to thank you for your grace as we adjusted to my scheduling change today. I'm really looking forward to sharing some tools to navigate the path towards personal and professional development, and also tools and insight that I have learned along the way that really have enabled me to make a lasting impact in my own life and the lives of those around me. And so let me start by telling you a little bit about myself while I get the presentation on the screen. I'm hoping that you guys could see that. But more than 10 years ago, I was struggling through a divorce. I had put up with the bad relationship for far too long, but I kept telling myself that I stayed for the girls. I also, in the back of my head, knew that I was comfortable. And so finally one day, after a big argument with my ex, my oldest daughter asked me, "Mom, why do you stay?" And in that moment, I knew that she was right. So we left that very night with really only the clothes on our backs. That was one of the first times that I found courage, the courage to believe in myself and to know that I deserved more. I had been an executive's wife and a stay-at-home mom for almost 20 years. And suddenly I found myself sleeping on my sister's couch, without a car, looking for a job, and worse yet, at least in my mind, was having to stand in line for food and cash assistance. I was starting over, and I learned some really hard lessons. At the Michigan Works office that is similar to the Slate office here in St. Louis, I remember telling my caseworker that although I had an MBA, the only experience I had was speaking Spanish and being a Girl Scout leader. I was no longer somebody's wife, and I couldn't hide behind being my kid's mom. And in that moment, as scary as all of that was, I didn't know who I was without those titles. And so this is really where my journey on claiming my power and influence began. And the key point I want to make today is that we all have the power to be influential within our roles, regardless of our title, where we are in our entrepreneurial journey, where we sit in our organizations, and also in our personal lives. Hello, everybody. My name is Gabriela Ramírez-Arellano, and I want to talk to you today about claiming your power and influence. Unfortunately, many of us don't see ourselves as influential because of the framework of power that we've been working with for far too long. So I want to do a few things during our time together, including defining power and influence. And then I want to talk a little bit about how changing the way you define power and influence can help you make a greater impact. I also want to look at some challenges that as women especially come up against, and finally provide some solutions based on my own experiences. So let's start with, what is power? What does power mean to you? I'm going to go ahead and ask you to share some of your thoughts in the chat. What comes to mind when you think of power? And the reality is, as you either bring it to the front of your brain, your mind, or you write it in the chat, is that we are essentially all right. But let's look at power more closely, because we all have power and can use it. We just don't always use it. So let's look at the different types of power. You may have seen some of this before. And as I prepared for this presentation, I wanted to look and compare the different types of power, because we don't often think of that they all exist, and they can exist within our everyday. So let's look at each one. So first, there's coercive power. This is the one that we too often associate with. Picture someone that uses power as a threat to get things done. You probably know it has limited effectiveness and does not inspire loyalty. This could be seen in the form of threats of write-ups or demotion, a pay cut, maybe a layoff, if an employee doesn't follow orders or doesn't meet certain quotas. And then there's the power of reward. This is the opposite of coercive power, and it comes from the ability to reward others to get things done. It does have some effectiveness, but will also depend on the reward to inspire the person. So some examples of these would be discretionary bonuses or lunch or dinner at a favorite restaurant, tickets to a sporting event, or a special award ceremony when someone meets a quota or does something that we want them to. And then last in these first three is positional power. This is the power that comes from your title or your level in the organization. As a wife, that was my power that I thought that I brought to the table. As a mom, in certain situations, that was the power that I brought. But think of the CEO or the vice president, the board chair, people who do what you ask because of your authority. Whether they want to follow or not depends on other factors. So positional power is given by the organization. But like I mentioned, there are also other forms of power. I want to start off with expert power. This power comes from having an expertise or technical skill. So ask yourself, what do people usually come for you to solve? That's your expertise. In my own life, I was the expert when I was offered the job at Girl Scouts because I understood Girl Scout programming and the Hispanic community's needs. Never in a million years did I think that that would be my expertise when I was there at the office asking for support and help in finding a job. But apparently, because I hadn't really thought about it, that was the expertise I brought to the table, and it helped me get my first job. There's also referent power. This is the power of connection. People see you as powerful because of your connections to others and how you make them feel. Reverent power comes from being trusted and respected, and we can gain it when others trust what we do and respect us for how we handle situations. In my own experience, I was hired as a SWAT City program manager in Detroit because of the relationships to the Hispanic community that I had built over time that others did not have, nor could they develop quickly. And then last but not least, there's informational power. This is about having information that others don't. This can be information about the organization or business, or maybe from your network. Having control over information that others need or want puts you in a powerful situation. As a business counselor, when I worked at the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, for example, I had information about minority contracting, minority certification, and small business development, as well about the Hispanic community and what their needs were. And so I was often asked to speak and share my insight or join a board because of the knowledge that I possessed. The first three are less effective and tend to come with formal authority. Those are the ones that we usually think about when we think about power. The second three are areas where you have the opportunity to build power regardless of where you are right now. And these are the types of power I want to encourage you to leverage. So think about what info you have access to. What relationships do you have? What expertise do you have? And now let's also look at influence though. If you can in the chat, write, what do you think about when you hear the word influence? Or bring to mind situations where you felt like you had influence. Is it positive or negative? It can be both. So let's go ahead and define what influence is. So at a basic level, influence allows you to have a say and get other people to listen to you. And according to the dictionary definition, influence is the capacity to have an effect on the character, development, or behavior of someone or something, or the effect itself. And so this could be basics like having a good understanding of your business to present your ideas, having the confidence to speak up, because you can have all the best ideas, but if you don't share them, you're not going to be heard. Maybe having the presence to effectively sell your ideas. And I'll talk a little bit more about presence in a little bit. And then also motivating others to take action. Because at the end of the day, it's about getting things done. So we talked about power, we talked about influence, but what are the challenges for us, right? So where do we get stuck as women and why? For me, I feel that we just get uncomfortable with the thought and concepts of power because we tend to automatically think of power over situations and not power within, right? And so power over are those exertions of power where we threaten people or where we reward them to do the things, not necessarily because they want to, but because we're putting them in a situation where it makes the most sense for them to do so. And so for a long time, I thought more about the power I didn't have than the power that I do. Even something as simple as taking a compliment. Why not accept the power of being a trendsetter or a sharp dresser? So often we downplay the compliment. Oh, this old thing, I just threw it together. Right? Do you do that? Do you identify with that? Because someone will say, oh, I like the way you did your makeup, or I like the way that you put together this presentation. And we so often don't accept the power because we're so uncomfortable with it. What about you? Do you own your expertise? You're being well connected, or perhaps your skills as a visionary or a strategic thinker? So this by no means is an inclusive list of the challenges that we face. There are a lot more that we encounter in claiming our power and influence. But I want to go over these here, these 6, that are some of the ones I often see in myself and that I see others struggling with. I also want to recognize that I cycle through some of these depending on where I am in my life or perhaps my confidence level. So let's go through all of them. And as I talk a little bit about each, make a mental note of your current challenge, or perhaps the patterns that emerge within these challenges. So first, let's look at the disease to please. We want to be liked, and we're uncomfortable taking a strong stance. So often we give our power away when we try to be all the things for all the people. And Harriet Breaker, in her book, Disease to Please, Curing the People-Pleasing Syndrome, talks a lot about this toxic mindset that rationalizes and perpetuates the problem, and the fear and avoidance of anger, rejection, and confrontation that fuel that emotional avoidance pattern, right? So we often say yes or go with the flow just so that we are liked or that we are not seen as doing something different or maybe perhaps rocking the boat. And then let's also look at self-doubt. I don't know about you, but I go through a number of times in my everyday where I doubt myself, right? This is us undermining ourselves in the sense that we're not as qualified as others think. This includes something that I shared earlier, not taking that compliment for what it is and downplaying it. And so when we doubt ourselves, it makes it hard for other people to believe in us. And all of these are so well aligned. If you really look at each one of these, you'll see that they go into the next one. And I want to talk about weak presence and thread lightly, because I'm not talking so much about what you look like or how you're dressed, although we have to admit that that's a factor. I'm talking about the way that you present or dismiss yourself, about those times when we use submissive language or body language that undercuts our own message. Think about those times when you avoid eye contact, or you say things like, well, this may sound stupid, or maybe in a meeting, you start a comment and you preface it by saying, I'm sure someone already thought about it. So I just want to remind you that if you think that you're not adding value, how will anyone else think that you are? And then let's look at influence. We talked a little bit about it before, but it just makes so much sense because, like I said, these are all so well tied together. How do you gain the ability to have an effect on the character, development, or behavior of someone else? This requires credibility. And how do we get that? Through strategic relationships and self-promotion. In a Forbes article from 2016, writer Herminia Ibarra talked about how most of us realize that networking is essential. We know that it's needed to get things done in our day-to-day jobs and for our long-term career success. But when it comes to daily choices about how we spend our time, developing our networks intentionally tends to fall far down the list of priorities. It's our social capital, right? I don't know about you, but I just recently learned about social capital, and it's been an interesting journey. I'm not saying that we don't have networks. We do. We just need to start to think more strategically about who we know, what they do, and how we add value with each of these points of connection. And so the reminder that our networks expose us to new ideas, get us information, and support what we want to bring to life while we expand our influence, also alert us to opportunities. And I think it's really important to remember that the networks and the networking is not just about the people that are in your circle, but really how we connect those dots for those people and the value that we also bring to the network. And so lastly, our lack of self-promotion is also a challenge. We struggle to share with others our expertise, our passions, and our work in and outside of our 9-to-5 for fear of tooting our own horn or bragging. I cannot tell you how often people reach out and say, I just feel like I'm bragging. But I'm talking about sharing your value with others. So this could be sharing your value, your expertise, your knowledge in a conversation, on LinkedIn, or in your community. Remember that strategic relationships are key to getting buy-in from people around you. So you're going to need these relationships to get others on board. The good news is that most of these challenges are within our control. So there are some things that we can do. And so the first thing I'm going to ask you to do is to reframe how we look at our attitudes around power and influence. I'm going to ask you to understand, really understand, what power and influence mean to you, and then also look to see where you need to work on that. This could mean you stop playing small, or perhaps you start to focus on the power you have and not what you don't have. Another part of this reframe is looking at collaboration as a way to build trust and relationships with other people. We can't do this work alone. We will always need someone by our side, helping us, or from afar helping us, or cheering us on, or pointing us in the right direction, holding us accountable. And then also, you want to manage this disease to please. You want to take a stance when you need to and support your position with data or the facts. And be warned that inevitably you're going to upset other people who are happy that you haven't taken a stand in the past. So be prepared to rock the boat a little bit as you manage this disease to please, right? So what am I talking about? I'm talking about if you disagree with something in a founders meeting, or you want to go in a different direction, speaking up doesn't mean that you're going to get your way, but it does mean that you share your point of view and your perspective to perhaps add to the conversation, to help people understand why you want to go in a different direction and make the case for what you are offering. The self-doubt. So imposter syndrome, like I said, we all struggle at different times in our life, at different points in our careers. Sometimes we're aware of it, and many times we're not. But especially when you transition to roles with greater responsibility or visibility, it's going to come to light. So the official definition of imposter syndrome is a psychological pattern in which one doubts one's accomplishments. And we have this persistent fear that's internalized of being exposed as a fraud. And we all go through it, right? You get a new role, and then you suddenly start to wonder, can I really do this? Or perhaps you have to make a very important presentation in front of a large audience, and suddenly you're doubting yourself. You're doubting the content that you have or the value that you bring. So I want to caution you about not getting caught up comparing yourself to others, and instead focusing on the strengths you have by celebrating your uniqueness. It wasn't until I started to leverage my ability to speak Spanish in my culture that I realized my potential. As I shared with you before, I was just really returning to the job force. So I didn't have years of experience in the workforce, and I had not attended any leadership trainings. And so some of the things that we consider success, but no one else could speak Spanish, right? No one else understood Hispanic culture like I did. So even today, those are two areas where I bring the most to the table. But for a lot of these reasons, I doubted myself, or I didn't give it the value that I could have. And this expertise about understanding a specific community and understanding Spanish led me to have the courage to found my own nonprofit during the pandemic. My friend Lourdes and I founded Estia Juntos, a Facebook resource page, as I realized that the stay-at-home orders and other information about the pandemic here in the region were being distributed. None of it was in any language other than English. And so we just started. We wanted to educate, we wanted to inform and provide resources to Spanish speakers in the region who were seeing information from other states and falsely believing it, or really just being at a loss onto what to do if you were sick, how to isolate, where to get your vaccine if you were interested. And since then, because of this expertise, we have been able to collaborate with various organizations, including a Washington University professor, St. Louis City, St. Louis County, a number of nonprofits. Currently, we're working on a language access plan. And suddenly, we became the experts. And we're starting to get invited to provide insight to county officials and city officials as we saw the spike in the cases in the Hispanic community. Even now, after the pandemic, we are still working very closely with a lot of the organizations to ensure that the plan continues and that the work continues. The same thing with the podcast, right? Like, we started Auténtico Podcast because we wanted to provide Latinos and Spanish speakers an opportunity to highlight and share their stories. And we jumped into it, doubting ourselves, wondering if this was the right thing. You know, there's a million other podcasts, there's a million other shows, who's going to listen? But when we really quieted those voices and those doubts, it was when we were able to make great strides. And another way that has helped me manage self-doubt is really keeping track, right? And so how do you track your accomplishments? I'm saying that it has helped me because I have seriously taken a little sheet with a tally and just focusing on some of my strengths. So I'm going to ask you to do the same. Document your wins and your accomplishments on a daily basis in the beginning. And as you get more comfortable with it, you may not have to keep track, but you're going to actually see the success. And it will remind yourself that it's not luck, right? So keeping a record of your successes really allows you to see that you were able to do amazing things. One of my coaches, when I started really getting into the workforce and doing more work here in St. Louis, I realized I couldn't do it myself. And so I got a coach, and she said I should use LinkedIn to share my insights as well as my accomplishments with my network. And it was hard in the beginning. I didn't know where to start. I had the longest time writing a post, but by doing so and getting more comfortable doing it, it has led to many great opportunities. At the end of the day, you know that you don't know everything. And so leveraging your resources is really important. It's important to focus on the areas that you care about and ask for help from others. Building key relationships will be important for you to do that. So strengthen your connections with peers and also connect outside of your normal circle of work and friends. If you always hang around with the same people or like-minded people, you're not really able to get different perspectives and get ideas that maybe you would not have thought about. In my role as the executive director of the BALSA Foundation, and in case you haven't noticed, I wear a lot of different hats, collaboration has been key. We're an all-volunteer organization. Our partners, our funders, they make our work possible. But if I try to do it all myself, we would not be celebrating 7 years of funding and supporting first-time entrepreneurs to grow and scale their business, because we are all volunteers. We all have a role to play, and being able to ask for help, being able to count on other partners has made a key difference in the work that we do. And I mentioned a little bit about promoting yourself, and I also talked about the struggles and the pushback that I've gotten from some people that I really talk to. But what I have found is that to influence others, you really have to have credibility. And so a track record of success and self-promotion should be woven into how you build your career and how you build your business. The reality is that by not promoting yourself, you limit the team that you work with, you limit the community that you live in, the region, your organization, from taking advantage of what you bring to the table. And so I have some ideas for you about how you could do that to ensure that others also see your value. One idea would be updating your manager or your co-founder and your network on the successes that you have inside and outside of work. During a one-on-one, it could be during a casual conversation, or maybe during your review so that it's in your official record. One of my favorites is using social media as a way to update and to let others know how your strengths tie to them. Like I said, it wasn't easy, and it took me a long time to feel comfortable with it. Sometimes I still don't. AI has helped me a lot, so look at that. But really using social media has allowed me to leverage the work I'm passionate about and the things I want to make an impact about in St. Louis. And I would recommend that you do that too. And of course, I'm here. I'm going to share my contact information. If you have ideas or if you have questions or doubts, reach out. We could work on a couple together. I can be your accountability. I work with a couple of other people on accountability as far as that as well, because we are so hard on ourselves and we really struggle with talking about our strengths. But like I said, I started to use LinkedIn to share info such as panels I participated on, like today, or keynotes I presented, as well as articles I had read. And I was really able to leverage my resources by promoting other women as well, and helping them see potential for collaboration. So you want to make sure that you talk about how amazing you are, right? And then also offer your expertise to others. If you're invited to a meeting, you're expected to add value. And these are honestly great opportunities to share your ideas and to give people insight into who you are and what you know, but you need to be visible. I was on a Zoom meeting the other day, and it was so frustrating for me that there were like 10 people on the call, but not a lot of people had a lot of insight to provide. And so I wasn't sure if they were disengaged, if they really just didn't want to be there, or maybe they just didn't want to be held accountable for their idea. So if that was you, if you're quiet at a meeting, start speaking up, volunteer to give your insight, share your expertise, and share your opinion. The easiest thing is offer to help. Offer to help to lead the meeting, to speak at a meeting, perhaps offer to help the meeting attendees get the agenda together before the meeting, right? Get involved, and you may have to take smaller steps in the beginning, but it does make a difference when you offer others your help. And then also speak up at these meetings, right? I'm not talking about just in person. All of these Zoom calls are perfect, but they are also a great opportunity for you to be more visible in the chat box. Zoom meetings have been perfect for me because of the flexibility with scheduling and not having to travel, but they do allow you to be in the chat box and add your insight. Sometimes I like to respond to the speaker in the chat box, or maybe provide additional resources in the chat box. And what I do is, as when I'm in a meeting, as people are speaking up in the chat, I'll take note of who they are, and then I want to follow them, or I want to maybe click the links that they're sharing. But contribute to the conversation, whether you're in a meeting online or in person. And if you're the leader or the host, make sure that you're inviting people to give their insight and help them also shine. I remember being on a call early in the pandemic, and we were planning a conference. I wasn't really sure what direction we were going, and I had been pretty quiet. And I really appreciated the meeting leader took some time to say, hey, Gabriela, what do you think about this specific thing? It could also be intimidating to call someone out. In that situation, I really thought it was kind of cool that she noticed I wasn't speaking up, or that she really wanted to, know what I was thinking at the time, especially around what our next steps were. So let's talk a little bit about managing your presence. In this context, it's about controlling the controllables. So I'm not talking about dressing to the nine, but if that's important to you, by all means. For me, sometimes it's my favorite lipstick on Zoom, or maybe my favorite pair of shoes in person. But you want to make sure that you use body language effectively. Sit or stand tall. Figure out what makes you feel powerful and confident. And I don't know about you, but I love TED Talks. And so Amy Cuddy had a great TED Talk, if you haven't seen it, from 2012, about power poses to strike before a presentation. And so she goes through some ideas on the poses that you could take before you go into a scary situation or a speaking engagement or perhaps a Zoom call, and how there's data to show that those poses really do help you feel more confidence during the presentation. Some other suggestions are to make eye contact, turn on your camera. I know that we're all getting zoomed out, and I feel like a lot of people and a lot of organizations no longer really look as having your camera on as a requirement, but especially when you're listening to someone else, it's kind of nice to see a smiling face or a nodding face. So turn on your camera when you can, and then also smile. Many of us are sometimes, I will say I am sometimes accused of having a resting face, to put it nicely. And so I try to smile as much as I can, because sometimes I can't control what my face does. I'm not sure about you, but so keeping a conscious thought about my smile always helps me feel more confident and manage my presence as well. And then a strong body language also helps you speak with conviction, because how do you convince your friends if you're not confident? You more than likely speak with passion when you're sharing your favorite book or restaurant, especially if you're trying to convince someone to go to the local X restaurant or to go to this bar, right? So choose your words carefully. There's a difference in saying, my name is Gabriela Ramírez-Arellano, and I want to talk to you today about claiming your power and influence. And me saying, my name is Gabriela Ramírez-Arellano, and I want to try to talk to you today about claiming your power and influence. Granted, I purposely did that, but I feel like you get the gist, right? Then I also want to recommend that you consider the negative self-conversation that you have with yourself on the way to a meeting or a presentation, maybe in your commute to work or in the shower, anywhere else that you talk to yourself. This will affect not just the way you present yourself, but also how others see you. And this includes the minimizing language that I mentioned earlier, like, I'm sorry if someone already mentioned it, or not sure if this is worth sharing. Apologizing and, in essence, taking responsibility for things you don't have control over does not help other people. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought, but I was really talking about something I'm working on this year is not apologizing, right? And so saying thank you for your grace. Thank you for being patient with me, instead of I'm sorry for being late. I feel like it helps me feel more comfortable if I am running behind when I start with a thankful attitude for myself and for the person. And then lastly, I have to mention again how important sharing your accomplishments is for managing your personal and professional presence. Make it a point to also share others' accomplishments publicly. For me, this mostly means on social media. And so I'll give you some examples. Susie had a book launch, so I posted, let's support her by purchasing a copy. And my friend Jennifer had a speaking engagement at a conference. So on social media, I said, let me reshare and give her a shout out. Another friend of mine just opened her new location. And so I posted about helping me to promote her, that I was going to be there. And I also invited others to check out her new store and perhaps find some amazing fashions. It's not hard, but you do have to be intentional. I also want to say that getting through the aftermath of my divorce required me to start from scratch. And I believed that I had neither power nor influence, but I knew that I wanted and I needed both. These were not easy or overnight realizations and transformations. And some of these lessons I learned along the way, and others I've really been able to get clarity on in the last couple of years. But one of my favorite lessons has been to thank people, as I mentioned earlier, for their patience with me instead of apologizing for a delay or a monkey wrench in technology. Working remotely and virtual meetings, presentations, and the like have changed the way that we do things. So this is the perfect time to change the way that you also look at power and influence and the way that you react to it. And I know that I've said a lot, and it's a lot to take into. So I want to leave you with some specific lessons learned from me. Believe in yourself and your ideas. Put courage over fear. You were hired to do a job because someone believed in you. You were asked to join a board because you have expertise to contribute. You were invited to lead a presentation or a meeting because someone saw your value. Be visible. Influence requires visibility. Toot your own horn. Find a way to do so that you're comfortable with, and then also promote and celebrate others. Remember that collaborations allow you to leverage your networks and other people's to build the relationships that you need. And lastly, have a strong presence. Speak with the intention of being heard. Talk confidently. Use those power poses. Leverage your successes to be more visible online. And use your online presence as a virtual resume. And so now it's your turn. What adjustments can you make to your behavior and the way that you think to claim your power and influence? So I'd love for you to put one takeaway that you would like to work on in the chat box. Lynn will be sharing the recording with me, and I really want to be able to look through some of those. Maybe you're thinking of starting in a new industry or launching a new business, or perhaps you're just ready to do something different, but I really want to see those answers. And so I also want to have you reach out to me with any questions and feedback that you have. I want to invite you to check out our conversations with small business owners and Latino professionals on our website, authenticopodcast.com, and also on our collaboration with St. Louis Public Radio on We Live Here Auténtico, or any of your favorite podcast platforms. And I really want to make sure that I thank the City of Webster Groves for the invitation and the opportunity to share my story and insight with you, especially Shayla Ford for the recommendation. Thank you to participate. And thank you, Lynn, for your flexibility with me and offering this series of sessions for our community. There is one more session that's coming up on August 8th, presented by Precious Simone on leveraging your network. So be sure to check it out. And don't forget that for those who identify as women, live in Webster Groves, and attend or watch all 3 recordings, there is an opportunity for you to receive a $1,500 microgrant to help further and develop your business. And I think those awards will be developed toward the end of 2023. So big thanks to the grant from the National League of Cities Institute, City Inclusive Entrepreneurship Program for making this opportunity and this series possible. I hope that this is not the end, because I am available to answer any questions that you may have. So please reach out to me on LinkedIn. If you have not already, I would encourage you to put your LinkedIn link in the chat so that others can also connect with you based on today's conversation, because already we have something in common, right? We're all working or at least interested in our power and influence. And there's power in the network. So connect with each other. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Lynn.
Okay. Well, I just feel so energized by that. I know you'll be watching this recording, so thank you, Gabriela. I found your content to just be so tactical and such helpful hands-on advice, as well as important larger concepts for us all to think about. So I wanted to just ask, because I know Gabriela would love to hear this. I'm seeing such great comments in the chat here about steps that you can take. And if anyone hasn't participated yet, I'd really love to ask, what is one step that you want to take even this week to further claim your power and influence, or one way that you want to be personally challenged? Another thing I'd invite you to share in the chat is what's an accomplishment that you want to celebrate, that you can share with this community who's just here to root you on. What's an accomplishment that's happened in your life this year that you want to take credit for? Carol, to your question about can you see other participants, let me check. to be honest, I'm not sure how to do that at this moment. I see that you can see the participant count. But I will invite those who would like to be seen to share your name or your website. And as you continue to share in the chat, this is so great. I know this will make Gabriela really happy to see. Just know that we're also putting together a community connections list. So when I hear things like Gabriela talking about the TED Talk with power poses, or some of you sharing these resources, I'm doing my best to harvest all those. And after August 8th, when our next webinar is complete, I'm going to send out that list. So y'all have some book and podcast recommendations, as well as local networks. So I would also invite you, if there's entrepreneurial confidence building and support for women tools and resources that either you directly offer or that you know about, please feel free to share them in the chat for the betterment of everybody here. And we will be reviewing. And then also, if you want to share about your personal business, like Heather here, thank you. We're just really all in this together. And I think one of our superpowers as women business owners is collaboration. So really excited to see all of you here. I also just feel inspired to share a poem. So please feel free to continue discussing in the chat. This is one of my personal favorite books. It's called The Book of Qualities by J. Ruth Gendler. And this one's called Power. And Gabriela's content really made me think of it. It's a short poem, but I want to read it to you. So feel free to take a breath. Just take it in. Power made me a coat. For a long time, I kept it in the back of my closet. I didn't like to wear it much, but I always took good care of it. When I first started wearing it again, it smelled like mothballs. As I wore it more, it started fitting better and stopped smelling like mothballs. I was afraid if I wore the coat too much, someone would want to take it, or else I would accidentally leave it in the dojo dressing room. But it has my name on the label now, and it doesn't really fit anyone else. When people ask me where I found such a becoming garment, I tell them about the tailor, Power, who knows how to make coats that you grow into. First, you must find the courage to approach him and ask him to make your coat. Then you must find the patience inside yourself to wear the coat until it fits. I just like that line and that reminder that power and claiming your power and influence really is a practice and a muscle that we get to work out and strengthen and really help each other build. Just taking a look at the chat here. Kim, no worries about your LinkedIn. If you want to share the name that you have on LinkedIn, people will be able to search for you that way. And you can also go to your LinkedIn profile and just copy the URL from the top of the page and paste in here. But all good if not. Oh, this is great. Yeah, we have so many powerful folks attending this series. I think we have about 75 folks who have registered so far, and the numbers will keep going up. So as you know, we're in our second of 3 webinars right now. And next week, Tuesday, August 8th, 6 to 7 p.m. will be Precious Simone, who's a 2-time best-selling author and inspirational speaker who I had the privilege of working with a few years back. And she's going to be talking with us, kind of piggybacking actually on what Gabriela brought up about leveraging our network, how to really build meaningful connections and maximize that opportunity of who's around you and who are you not thinking of and who's outside your immediate circle and how can you add value to those around you. She is just a real force of energy and positivity and engagement. So come ready to play to that one. And if you haven't already registered, you can just go back to that same website where you initially registered, which is webstergrovesmo.gov/empowerwomen. And Jenny, I would love if you can just pull up our last few slides here, with just a couple last pieces to share logistically. Thank you so much. Okay, so you see this QR code here. This is for the 5-minute survey that I asked y'all to take a few minutes to fill out. You can find the survey link at that same website that I just said, or you can scan the QR code here. Yes, I can absolutely put the link to register in the chat. Thanks, Joni. This survey, it's short, but it really will help us get information about who came, what your takeaways are. And this, as many of you, I'm sure, who are involved in grants, this is really the gold that we need to be able to harvest and make the case for future funding and future programs like this, and how to make it more accessible for folks in the future. Heather, thanks so much for letting me know. So the survey is something that we want you to fill out for each webinar that you attend. And if it says it's already filled in, we'll look in our settings and make sure that you can in fact fill it out again. Or I can email you a special link. Please feel free to email me directly. I'm going to just put in the chat my contact information. So Joni, here is the website. It's webstergrovesmo.gov/empowerwomen. And then if anybody has any questions along the way, other ideas, feedback, we're wide open. So here is my email, which is o'brienl@webstergrovesmo.gov. And Jenny, if you could grab the next slide for me, please. Okay, so some of you have asked about this microgrant opportunity. So this, the grant that we're working with is allowing us to give away 5 $1,500 microgrants. The requirements this time around are to identify as a woman, to live in Webster Groves. I want to acknowledge there was a typo in the last webinar. It's living in Webster Groves versus working. And thank you so much to those who pointed that out. Attending all 3 webinars and then completing the short survey for each. Those are kind of your ticket to get this really simple application for a microgrant to be considered for that. The microgrant application might take 10-15 minutes, and those will be available August 8th, the day of our last webinar, until the 20th. And then we're actually able to award funds by the end of August. You don't need to be in a certain stage of business development. So this could be if you have an idea for something in the future that you want help getting off the ground, or if you've been in business 20 years and you just have a project or something that those funds would help support. Next slide, please, Jenny. And again, we just give thanks to the National League of Cities and the City Inclusive Entrepreneurship Program. And then lastly, coming soon from that same email that you got the link from, my email, I'll be sending you a link to the 5-minute survey if you didn't catch it here, and then a webinar recording as well. Each of these webinars are recorded and will be available on our YouTube page. And then I'm putting together this community connections list. So a lot of our content will be captured here. There's my email again if you have questions. Heather, thank you for the shout out. Yes, I'm also a business owner and singer. Please feel free to check out my work as well. Jenny, do we have a last slide there? I think it's the series once again. All right, great. Yeah, let's do that one. Thank you. So again, Tuesday is our last webinar of this series, August 8th, 6 to 7 p.m. Please feel free to share this with your network. People can register up until, I believe it's end of day on the 6th. So that's Sunday. And we definitely want to help get this juicy information out to as many folks as we can. So thank you again so much for coming. Are there any other questions, takeaways, anything else you want Gabriela to hear or receive? Please feel free to put it in the chat, and I'll just invite you to take one last breath here and sit up straight and just really feel your power and influence in this moment and know that it can only grow from here. And again, Jenny, one of our folks at City Hall who's been helping with this series, thanks for adjusting the survey. So if anyone did have issues filling it out the second time, you should be able to just refresh it and fill it out again. But again, if you have questions, just reach out. Thank you all so much. This has been really inspiring, and take good care. We'll see you next time, hopefully.